they have a fraudulent money system, which can only remain stable so long as the system is growing. So you have to constantly be pulling borrowers. In order to pull in more borrowers, you need more collateral. And once you've saturated the domestic economy, then you have to go take other people's collateral. And that's when, investment starts flowing into the military industrial conquest. And then you start contriving these conflicts and wars where you just simply go to the foreign country and you colonialize it. And this has been example after example after example. We have extensive historical record of British Empire doing this. The gunboat diplomacy, going to Japan and saying, well, open up your markets to us, or else we're gonna shoot, we're gonna destroy your cities. And then if the Japanese said no, then they actually went there with ships and cannons and started shooting into the cities and setting them on fire. Same thing with India, with China, with Africa, and so forth. I think that this is what led Lord Acton to say that the issue that has swept through centuries and that will have to be fought sooner or later is people versus the banks.
Take the first step towards online privacy. Get NordVPN.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Harley. First time both of you have been together on my channel, which I appreciate, but you two have been together before. Harley, you are from the LaRouche organization, and you're the chair or the president?
President of the LaRouche organization.
President of the LaRouche organization. And Alex, you are the president of yourself, I understand.
That's right. The democratically elected.
Democratically elected, right? That's right.
Well, my position plus 10 euros will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Great. Okay. And we're recording this on Friday, the 8th of November, 7 p.m. UK time. And not much has happened this week. Not much at all.
Yeah, it's been slow. It's been slow on the news front. I think George Clooney said something, but I didn't get around to reading it.
Yes. Okay, so we've had the US elections, and let's start there, because there was the US elections, and then within 24 hours, the German government collapsing. And Harley, I know you're in Germany, and Alex, you're in France, and I think the whole world is going to be impacted by the outcome of the US election. So let's start with that. What is the impact going to be on Europe and the rest of the world? Who wants to start?
If I may, let me start with the United States, because I just came back from 3 weeks of organizing as part of the presidential campaign, doing some reporting. And what's amazing is the degree to which the establishment is trying to underplay or downplay what happened. They're pointing fingers of blame, but they're missing the big picture. The big picture is there's a rebelliousness worldwide against the establishment, against the globalists, against the attempt to have a one-size-fits-all, which is essentially to benefit the corporate cartels and the billionaire class. And Trump very effectively tapped into the anger at that, and they're still denying it. They're still trying to say it's racism, he's a fascist, they're reviving Russiagate, because they don't want to address the fact that there's a censorship policy which is being rejected by the population, and there's an attempt to create new cultural norms, which people aren't ready for. But more importantly, they're ignoring the economy completely. They say, well, the US economy is going great. But the reality is that the people who voted for Trump, and even some who voted for Harris, can't pay their rent. They can't pay food. They can't pay medical bills. And so when they're told, look, the economy is really good by well-paid journalists, they don't buy it. And so I think this is, the reality is striking. And then just to throw a couple other things besides the German election, we can talk about that in a moment. But there was the BRICS conference. There was Putin yesterday at the Valdai Club saying he intends to speak with Trump soon. Zelensky is at an event in Budapest with Orban, probably eating crow. So there's a lot going on. I'm interested in hearing Alex's take on some of this.
Thank you, Harley. That was magnificent what you said there. I got a lot from that. Thank you. Alex.
Well, I think there's not much to say more than what you said, Harley. This is exactly correct. Apparently, in all of the leading countries in the world this year, wherever the elections were held, the incumbent governments have fallen. So that speaks to the general rejection of the public of the system of governance that we have in place worldwide. And I always like to remind viewers and listeners that this is exactly where it's at, because this is what they themselves are telling us, that we are observing and experiencing a clash between two systems of governance. And so these systems of governance are a Western oligarchic system, which for 2,500 years has invariably given rise to oligarchies, colonialism, and imperialism, misery at home, permanent warfare abroad. And this is what we have to this very day. And I think that the mothership of that system of governance is the City of London.
Yeah.
And its main satellite is Wall Street. And this is who we are up against. It's not the United States, the monolith, against Russia, the monolith, against China, the monolith, against Iran. This is class warfare in actual fact. And now it gives rise to foreign wars because this oligarchy is always, through history, exactly the moneylender cartels, the bankers. And the reason why they incentivize foreign conquest is because their whole business model is based on taking control of collateral. And so they cannot be satisfied doing their business in their domestic economies, because they have a fraudulent money system which can only remain stable so long as the system is growing. So you have to constantly be pulling borrowers. In order to pull in more borrowers, you need more collateral. And once you saturated the domestic economy, then you have to go take other people's collateral. And that's when, investment starts flowing into the military industrial conquest. And then you start contriving these conflicts and wars where you just simply go to the foreign country and you colonialize it. And this has been example after example after example. We have extensive historical record of British Empire doing this. The gunboat diplomacy, going to Japan and saying, well, open up your markets to us, or else we're gonna destroy your cities. And then if the Japanese said no, then they actually went there with ships and cannons and started shooting into the cities and setting them on fire. Same thing with India, with China, with Africa, and so forth. I think that this is what led Lord Acton to say that the issue that has swept through centuries and that will have to be fought sooner or later is people versus the banks. And this is where we're at. This is the conflict that is, facing us directly today.
Yeah.
And obviously humanity has given its verdict, only I don't know that we are yet clear about who the enemy is. That is, some people are aware, many people still have to learn. So what happened in the United States this week is an enormously encouraging event, but it's not like now we can put our hands down and relax because Donald Trump will wave the magic wand and fix everything for us. I think that the full court press has to continue, and then this same wave of humanity which has swept Donald Trump into the White House once more needs to continue to follow him and to support him in all the measures that he has to enact and fulfill in order for us to actually prevail over this parasite. I just had this discussion with Mel K on her program yesterday, and then this morning I find a statement by Donald Trump on X where he very explicitly says some of these exact same things. So it's very encouraging.
Yes.
But as we know, he could be sabotaged through lawfare, through media harangue, and so forth. And so we need to continue constantly doing what we do in the sense of speaking out, organizing, keeping our eyes on the other side, and backing up the forces that are implementing these reforms so that they might be successful on a continuous basis. Trump gets 4 years, but it's not going to be over in 4 years. It has to continue. This is now the struggle of our lifetimes.
Alex, thank you. There's so much in there, Alex. There's so much
I'm
in
sorry, I would have broken it up into smaller bits if you told me.
well, one of the things I want to say is that I will have the links to your respective Twitters and organizations, and people can find out and follow Alex there and follow the LaRouche organization, and Harley, your YouTube channel. Harley, you want to respond to some of what Alex said or all of it?
Oh, of course. Well, no, I find Alex very much on point on this whole question of an oligarchical system. Because when you look at it, what is an oligarchical system? It's essentially, that's the real form of racism. It's a certain group of people as they see themselves as superior by birth, in the case of monarchies, and who look at the rest of the world as plunder to loot them. Now, what's happening, what's unique about this situation is that you have a power that's equal to the unipolar sole superpower, that is Russia militarily, China economically, that are now together.
Yeah.
And they're saying that we're not going to allow this establishment to continue to loot, to plunder. And you have the emergence of the global South. Now, we saw this in the non-aligned movement in the late 1950s with Nehru and Sukarno and others. That was sabotage. Look at the price the Indians paid. You've had several prime ministers assassinated. You've had wars. Look at Pakistan. What happened to Ali Bhutto and then Benazir Bhutto? In the past, when you have an emergence in the global South, it's suppressed with assassinations, coups, civil wars. That's what the oligarchy does. That's their expertise. Now, the problem they have is that there are two problems, actually. One is that the global South is now in a situation where, because of what Russia and China have been doing, and India, the fact that you have an emergence of an alternative economic system, or the potential emergence of that, there's an ability for some of these countries to stand up and fight. And I'm inspired when I read about Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, poor, destroyed countries under the French control, who are now demanding their sovereignty. Now, the other problem you have with the empire is that if they're going to lose some of the ability to loot from the colonial sector, where do they go? They go into their own population.
Yeah.
And that's when they run into trouble. You look at the United Kingdom, which you can tell us a lot about, I'm sure, Rich. You look at Germany, the deindustrialization and the collapse that's been deliberately imposed by the leaders on behalf of this Anglo-American financial cabal. So you look at what's happening in the United States, and finally, the American people said, enough. Don't tell us that we're racist, because we're concerned with the fact that the government is spending hundreds of billions of dollars to fight wars in places that have little bearing on us, and there's nothing to help hurricane victims in North Carolina. So I think what's coming together is a global movement of potential to break from this oligarchic system. Now, that brings us to the real question, which is, it's one thing to know who your oppressor is and to fight against them. It's another thing to know what to do. And my movement has been based on the economic ideas of Lyndon LaRouche of physical economy, of the move away from a speculative system, which it benefits private interests. And when you get to the end of that speculative system, where you have nothing but debt and hot air, they try to go with the Great Reset. And they're trying it now, but it's not going to work. So the question is, can we get the people who are inspired to act to think on this higher level about what it is that is based, that is real wealth? And how can we make sure that there's enough wealth that's produced to handle the needs of 8 to 9 billion people?
Yep.
That's an intense question. The other side is saying, well, we can't do that, so we have to get rid of some of those people.
Yep. Yes. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Alex. You know what you said at the beginning, Harley, about this being a form of racism? I think it's really clear. It's class warfare. Empires eat their own. Imperialism, imperialist empire. And, you know, I'm at the effect of it in the UK, where the British Empire is going to cannibalize its own people by destroying farming, by destroying small businesses, and by destroying energy, depriving the people of energy in order to enrich themselves because they've run out of road for the debt, for the bond holders that they got to pay for the war in Ukraine. So I see it clearly as class warfare, and it's disguised really cleverly. And it's this whole woke agenda
Yeah.
about race and sex and gender and age and trans. What about class? No,
Yeah.
no mention of class in the dimension of intersectionality, right? Because that would be too dangerous and that would expose them. And then something that you said, Alex, about war, about how, if I would say this, and I'm sure you'd agree with me, Alex, that whenever there's a monetary collapse, they bring about war. I mean, you said as much in so many words, right? There is war. What do you see as the prospects for the Ukraine-Russia war, now with Trump in power, but also for the Middle East? Because I do sense a divergence in how
I
we'll deal with this.
I do sense divergence as well. I think there's a lot of confusion is maybe a strong word, but let's say that the messaging is not exactly clear. But I think that's also understandable because the people that we are opposed to and that the Trump administration is going to be opposed to have a lot at stake, both in Ukraine and in Israel, in Palestine. And so Trump could not overtly say, "Oh, we're gonna, end these wars right away, and we're gonna talk to the Iranians and the Russians and so forth." They've done so in the sense of speaking, "We're gonna end the war in Ukraine," but always couched in tough language, as in, we're going to come there and impose some kind of a solution on the Russians that they're going to have to take or else. And then same thing with Israel. And then there's always these signals that, we need to focus our attention on China because that's, our true real rival in this world. It's all completely unnecessary. And I'm not sure whether the signals coming from, people like Trump and JD Vance, whether these signals are genuine, whether they reflect genuine intent, or whether they were part of the election campaign talk, which was meant to give everybody an idea that, don't worry, we have your back. We're gonna back Israel. We're gonna, confront the Iranians. We're gonna regroup to confront China and so on, so that the Goldman Sachs's and JP Morgan's of this world might think like, okay, these are our guys. We don't need to go and assassinate them all straight away. What's going to happen in reality, I don't know. Again, I always go with this logic that in actual fact, the war on Ukraine is unnecessary. Completely. Sorry, not war on Ukraine. War on Russia through Ukraine is completely unnecessary. This struggle to preserve Israel is unnecessary. Israel was created not as a homeland for the Jewish people. That's the gift wrap that was sold to the public so that it would be able to put on this moral high ground where it cannot be questioned, that Israel has the right to exist. Israel was created exactly like Ukraine as a beachhead to be able to destabilize large regions of the Eurasian landmass so that it can be controlled and so that the Western money-lending oligarchy could maintain hegemony there so that they can control the collateral, and then give these resources for exploitation to their own clients, KBRs and Halliburtons and BPs and Shells of this world. So that's how and why Israel was created. And that's pretty clear from even before 1917, when the Balfour Declaration was addressed to the Rothschild banking family, and probably drafted by them as well. And same thing with the Far East. These divisions: Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Myanmar. All of these crisis flashpoints serve the same purpose. So if we take the route of let's defend our hegemony there, then you have to ask yourself why. Why do you even need the hegemony? the narrative that's being sold to the American people is, oh, and even RFK swallowed this
Yeah.
nonsense. Oh, if we lose hegemony over the Middle East, then we're going to lose control of all these oil resources, and our economy depends on them. Well, if you lived ever in a country like Switzerland or Sweden or Norway or Croatia, then you know that probably every day for the last nearly 100 years, you were able to buy chocolate and sugar and gasoline and load up your car and natural gas and everything else. How did it get there? Switzerland doesn't have any military bases in the Middle East. Neither does Croatia, neither does Sweden or Norway. They trade. They simply trade. They exchange what they have to buy what they need. And the United States can do the same. So you don't need military bases to be able to have cocoa and coffee in your supermarket and to have oil in your on your gas pumps. You trade. So it's again, like it's this: which system of governance do we fight for and defend? Do we want this oligarchic one that treats the whole rest of the world as their colony? Or do we go with productive economy that creates, that produces products and services that they can trade with other parts of the world in order to obtain what they need? And this is a very simple thing. So,
Alex,
again,
if I can just interrupt you,
yeah, please.
because I want to make a point and then bring it over to Harley, right? Because I'm conscious that time is limited.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. No, but I wanted just to wrap up. I wanted to say the choice is the system of governance. And if we go for the productive economy that produces and trades with the rest of the world, then all these wars are completely unnecessary. If we want hegemony to control the collateral and exploit everybody as a colony, well, then you need these wars. And so will the administration digest these views correctly and consciously choose the system of governance to implement?
Yeah, and I would say no. The tendency for American discourse is no, because it was formed as a colonial project that extracted resources from, as the European settlers arrived, destroyed the local population and stole their resources. And now all they do is the same thing on a much larger scale. And they're still trapped in that discourse, I would say. It's
well, okay, Rich, I want to push back against this. First of all, you should never say no. Not because you're wrong, but because you're actually contributing to an outcome. So right now we need to all be closing ranks and fighting for a certain future.
Accepted.
Whatever happened in the past does not absolve us for making choices today.
Absolutely.
And let me just say about that I think you're oversimplifying the whole question of the United States as a colonial project. There was a grouping that actually tried to establish a republic as an anti-colonial system.
Yeah.
And the best period of American history are when you had presidents who acted on behalf of this idea of a sovereign republic that has a responsibility to generate the credit and the banking system that will allow for the entrepreneurs and the inventors to create new wealth. But that was done constantly in a war with the British Empire. And the problem is, increasingly in the 20th century, the American system subordinated itself to the British after World War I. World War I was a geopolitical war organized by the British Fabian Society, which included the Balfour Declaration, which included the India-Pakistan divisions and so on, as an extension of the Great Game. So this question of defeating an empire, what I keep telling people in the United States is that America has an anti-colonial tradition. So why is it that we're joining with the City of London as an imperial force in looting Africa? Instead of seeing Africa as a potential productive powerhouse, Africa has youth. It's got a population that's hungry for development. And it's been oppressed by this international financial system for years. So the Chinese are going in there. The Russians are going in there. Now, why is that a threat to the United States? Why would the BRICS, the emergence of this new collection of nations that are very different but fighting for sovereignty, why would that be a threat to the United States or to Britain or to Germany? Why is China becoming a productive country a threat to us? It's not. And that's where you get into this question of narrative and censorship, destruction of creative education, classical education, so that you have people who can't think beyond their nose. And that's why people would accept a Biden or an Obama. I constantly run into people who say to me, well, you can't criticize Obama because he's black. What does that have to do with anything? So,
Harley, it works the same way. You can't criticize Stalin because he's white. That would be fair equivalence, right?
Well, or Hitler.
Yeah. Or any of the, I don't know, any of the Arab despots because they're Arabic. You can't criticize anybody, really.
Well, and of course, what's imposed by that is a silence. You silence debate.
Yeah.
And you see that in terms of the anti-Putin sentiment, that anyone who suggests that maybe Putin had some legitimate points about security of Russia from NATO, you're a Putin puppet. If you push that too hard, you get put on a hit list, as I've been put on a hit list of the Ukrainian Secret Service. But it's not the Ukrainians that run the hit list, it's NATO. So why is NATO protecting this narrative of democracy and freedom in Ukraine? It's what Alex just said. Ukraine, as Israel, are sledgehammers being deployed on behalf of imperial interests. And the victims, the Israelis are the victims of this, but they're doing it to themselves. Because the key to the British Empire was if you can get native populations to enslave themselves, then you can save your manpower costs and save the cost to the empire. And that's what's been perfected by the British Empire.
Yes. It's the British imperial elite are just shit stirrers everywhere, behind the curtain, pulling strings, right? Telling us to look over there, and all the while it's them. Okay. One of the things that I hope, and I can see little glimmers of this, right, is Trump's election will break apart the globalists' project for, it's not the Great Reset, it's actually the final solution.
Yeah.
Masquerading with this nice fancy name, the pretense of the Great Reset. No, it's their final solution. We'll break that apart. We'll have the dissolution of the European Union. Please, dear God. And it will embolden freedom-loving movements in the UK and the European Union and the Five Eyes nations in general, the Anglo-European sphere. And it's starting, I hope, well, I want to move it to Germany. I'm looking for a segue to Germany. Harley.
Well, that's perfect, because look what Germany, after World War II, was a victim of intensive brainwashing run by the Frankfurt School, the City of London, the collective guilt theory, so that anyone in Germany who thinks about being a patriot is immediately labeled a Nazi. So they've created a collective guilt theory that dominates Germany. The whole purpose of NATO, as Lord Ismay, the first General Secretary, said, was to keep the United States in Europe, the Soviet Union out, and Germany down. And you can see this. You just have to go to the Bundestag and watch these people. It's like a puppet show. Mm. Not so different, really, than the House of Commons, where you have people who have a great sense of self-importance who are doing nothing. But what's happened is that by subordinating themselves to NATO, they're destroying the productive engine of Europe. The European Union could never have consolidated itself without German machine tool sector and German auto sector, and the German economy as a whole radiating outward. Now it's collapsing, and you have a combination of green anti-science policy, the so-called green transition. You have radical free market with the Free Democrats, and then you have the impotent Schultz and the Social Democrats hunched over it. And they can't come up with any ideas except do whatever Washington and London tells them. And so you have a budget crisis, and they're still giving $8 billion to Ukraine when they're cutting education costs. My children go to schools that don't have enough teachers right now in Germany. They have the immigration problem, which was never resolved, which was supposedly a temporary thing, and the EU kept kicking it down the road. And more importantly, the whole idea of deindustrialization in a country with an growing elderly population, they need the immigration for the workforce. But it doesn't work. It doesn't function. Now, what's happening?
The obvious solution then is to kill off the elderly, because I imagine at some point you're going to have a proposal for assisted suicide, state-assisted murder, which is what
they
it
already had that.
Never do such a thing.
That was the start of the Nazis, the euthanasia policy.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, Keir Starlin is proposing that in the UK. We didn't vote for that.
Yeah.
It's the euthanasia. It's
just to finish the point, what happened is that Schultz is having a fight with his colleagues in the coalition. You know, Baerbock, the foreign minister, Habeck, the economic minister. These are morons. They're ideological morons. They have no idea what they're talking about. Lindner just says you have to cut taxes and stick with the black zero. And Schultz says, well, we have to help people, but we can't, so we have to help the Ukrainians. And the population in Germany, which is usually passive, is beginning to get angry. And I've been meeting with people who are on the so-called left, the Wagenknecht group, and the so-called right, the Alternative for Deutschland. These two parties are the ones that are growing. And why are they growing? They're against the war, they're against the Green New Deal, and they're against globalization.
And they're also both against open borders, is my understanding.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But then they fight each other. And the German internal police are deployed into these parties, so they'll fight each other, so they'll never form an alliance. So what's going to happen? I think that if they have an election in March, which it's looking likely now, we'll see the most intense censorship and deployment of false flags, so-called left-wing and right-wing terrorism, to scare the population into voting in Friedrich Merz of the CDU, who's from BlackRock. That's the policy, I think, that we're going to see from NATO to create the basis for Merz to come in as chancellor.
Harley, a question. What are the chances of Gerhard Schroeder's coming in and making any inroads?
It's very interesting because there's a faction in Social Democrats around Schroeder. Schroeder is one of the few people who still speaks favorably of Putin and Russia. Mützenich is another one of these characters. Schroeder, I've been told, is having some discussions both with Wagenknecht and with the AfD. And there's some people in the AfD is in the midst of a faction fight right now, whether they should openly support the BRICS or not. Now, imagine if the so-called right-wing extremist, racist nationalists are supporting an alliance with India and China and Africa. And what they're saying is the solution to the immigration problem is stop the damn wars and provide credit so these countries can develop. You'd never expect to hear that from the so-called the geriatric Nazis who the media says are running the AfD. But Schroeder's interesting. He's a very interesting character.
Wow. I didn't know he was still on the scene. So that's useful. Thank you.
He was targeted with sanctions because I think he had a role with Gazprom, didn't he, Alex?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
He did.
And I don't know exactly what his role was, but it was he had a very substantial role there.
Yeah. And he lobbied against the sanctions, which have
and against the Iraq War.
Obviously a far right white supremacist.
You know, I was at a march of the AfD. They asked me to make a few comments. And I looked out over the crowd, and it was a very diverse crowd. What was interesting is their signs were diplomacy, not weapons. And that's
so dangerous.
Disgusting.
That's really
devious. They're trying to fool people.
Yes. Okay. Alex, anything you want to say? Come back on, like maybe take it from Germany to what you see is happening in the European Union.
Well, you know, we see that all the elections have gone against the establishment parties, but the ruling establishment that's controlling all these parties is not going to go quietly into the night. So, you know, we see very strange things happening, like, Andrew Bridgen, by far the most popular politician in Britain, mysteriously losing to some woman who nobody ever heard of.
Yep.
even though he won every election before that and with a huge majority. And then we see in France.
Alex, sorry, just to add, and George Galloway, there was shadiness about his by-election loss.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yes, correct.
Because then you can't have Bridget Galloway and Farage in the same parliament. That's just
right.
that's trouble.
That's
So
like
then
the
you
Off
have
and Wagenknecht. Same.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's why she had to form her own party. And then you had elections in France where the left. Wait, how did it go? First, the anti-immigration right was going to win, and they won. And then they delayed and delayed and delayed, and then they were making noises like, no, we cannot possibly have these people win. They're racist, they're Nazis, they're fascists. And then they formed last minute before the elections, they formed this great left-wing front that brought together all the left-wing parties, and then they won. And then after they won the elections, then they were like, oh yeah, we can't appoint a new government because the Olympics, and then oh wait, we have to clean up after the Olympics, and oh wait, this and that, and then they're like, no, these left-wing parties are too radical, and anybody from these parties cannot be in the government. And then when Mélenchon was going to be out, but I forget, but it was such a soap opera saga, and in the end they appointed the government that didn't even win the elections, and so the ruling establishment went to outright stealing elections and disenfranchising the people openly. And so, when this starts to happen, then the next reaction might be the guillotines.
Yeah.
They're really playing with fire.
Yeah.
And just because nothing is happening today doesn't mean that the next crisis, some triggering event that nobody could have predicted sets off a cascade of events that, goes into an irreversible revolution. So that's what they're playing with. And then let's not forget, one thing that kind of got overshadowed by the US election and the news cycle were these cataclysmic floods in Spain. And they're very, very significant because they were not just a natural event. They were a consequence of this globalist, unelected bureaucracy imposing their rules on the governments, like the government of Spain. Part of the agenda, this is Agenda 2030, right? Part of that agenda, Article 6.6, is to restore the waterways to their natural flow. And so the city of Valencia was the most affected. At least 227 people were killed, and the scenes from Valencia are absolutely apocalyptic. And now, the press immediately ran with the stories about climate change and this and that, and the Guardian ran the most amazing story saying that what happened in Spain points to two undeniable truths. And one is that the climate change is real, and the other one is that the big oil is killing us. What they leave out is that in Spain after 1957, when they had another cataclysmic flood, Franco had major infrastructure projects where they built up all these dams that were built exactly to prevent what just happened last week. And in the last, I think in 2021 and 2022, following these WEF Agenda 2030 plans, they destroyed more than 80 dams.
I heard over 200.
No, that's all of Spain, but over 80 of them in exactly of all the water coming down the surrounding hills around Valencia towards the city. And so this is why this disaster happened. The sequence of the floods in that part of Spain are seasonal, And there are statistics going back to 1600 showing that every year there are so many floods, and they always peak in October. So it's kind of expected that, there are heavy rainfalls and there are floods. And every so often the floods are really, really big. So, after a really, really big one in 1957, Franco declared this Plan Sur. And under this plan, they did all this major engineering work so that this wouldn't happen anymore. And then the globalists went and had Spanish government rip it all out. And the Spanish people are not confused about why this happened. The Spanish people understand this perfectly. It has nothing to do with climate change. This has everything to do with these globalist degenerates. And then, so when Pablo Sanchez, the prime minister, went to visit the afflicted areas, and King Felipe and Queen Letizia went there, people yelled at them. They pelted them with mud. They screamed murder. They had to turn their 50-car motorcade around and run away. So, what I'm saying is there's a small increment in people's anger between that and lopping heads off. Pelting mud is here. The next step is beheading them. And they're really playing with fire at this point.
Well, and it's the dumping of manure on the mayor's homes in France.
Oh, that's
farmers. This is the same step. Look, you're absolutely right about this question of the agenda. The idea that you have to let rivers run wild, Mother Nature has to run its course, is a reversal of the projects of the Renaissance, and long before that. Man has always tried to fit nature to allow for the advance of man, which is not anti-nature. We're a part of nature.
Of course, termites do the same.
Yeah,
we are. Yeah, we're just bigger termites with hair. And on the Spanish thing, if I can come in there, that has an impact on Europe's food supply, because that part of Spain is incredibly productive in terms of food. I think something like 30 to 40% of Britain's vegetable imports come from that part of Spain. And then what we have in the UK is this new tax for farmers, family farms, having to pay inheritance tax, which they've never had to pay before, but is actually will have the impact of reducing farming productive capacity, where BlackRock and the government can buy up farmland, and all that knowledge gets lost that's not being passed down from farmers to his or her children and so on, and reducing the productive capacity, food prices going up, money printing carrying on anyway, so the purchasing power of the pound and the euro going down, people getting hungry, getting restive, and of course what I think they're going to do, take us to war.
Yeah. Well, and you see it with the NATO meetings that are taking place, where they're saying NATO must become war ready, because according to their experts, Putin is not going to stop at Ukraine. Now, I think there are two hopes that I have. One, that Trump will follow through with ending the war in Ukraine by cutting off U.S. weapon shipments. Now, then the question is, what happens? What will Europe do? And many of these governments in Europe are too bankrupt to carry it on by themselves. But ultimately, as Alex said earlier, I think it was Alex who said this, you can't rely on Trump. You can't rely on any individual. Unless you have a citizenry that's mobilized and at least understands what the issues are. And in particular, what we've been discussing, the oligarchy versus a population that sees itself as a republic, citizens of a sovereign republic. Unless you have that, people will be manipulated. And that's what identity politics is within countries. That's what geopolitics is between countries, the divide and conquer strategy. What is most exciting to me is the realignment in the United States after this election, is that the old Franklin Delano Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy Democratic Party is now in the Republican Party, although there's still a lot of bad neocons there. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is becoming the war party and the censorship party. If people get an understanding of why that's happening and what it's protecting, then maybe we can get to the solutions. And that's, I wish we had a little more time, because I'd like to hear Alex's thoughts on the BRICS summit, because I know Alex is very closely following that. but this represents something new, potentially. We can't rely on it for everything, but it does represent an avenue outside of the control of the Western central banks.
Harley, thank you, thank you, thank you. Alex, you want to say something about the BRICS?
Well, we just had the BRICS summit in Kazan. I think it was a great success. There are many, many issues to overcome, but it's a work in progress. And I think that it's a work in progress that is, driven by the whole of the global South's need and desire to find alternatives to, laboring under the diktat of the Western financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, under threat by the hegemons, carrier strike groups, and sanctions and assassinations, and all of this. So it's a very broad-based project. Obviously, it's hard to coordinate this thing, but I think that the progress is being done there. Let's not forget, the Bretton Woods system. It took, I think, 13 years to be fully implemented, between the initial conference in Bretton Woods. I think it wasn't fully implemented until 1958. And then after that, no, 10 years, 10 years. And then after that, it kind of disintegrated 13 years later. So it was unsustainable. The challenge of building something sustainable that brings the whole world together to cooperate, to create prosperity in peace, and to have conflict resolution mechanisms, credit allocation mechanisms, trade settlement currency, all of these elements, there isn't somebody imposing them. This has to be solved in a way that everybody agrees with. I think they're making tremendous progress in this direction, but I think it's unrealistic to expect that one summit under Russian leadership and everything should be, all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. It doesn't work that way, So it's silly to say like, oh yeah, this whole thing is failing, because they haven't put gift wrapping on it yet.
Hey, Alex, if I could just interrupt you on one point on that. One of the most exciting things was that the day before the summit in Kazan was the India-China announcement that they would resolve the border crisis. Yes. Because for them, economics and security are the same thing, and that's the Putin-Eurasian approach to Eurasia and so on. So your point is very well taken. Those people who think something's going to happen tomorrow, we're going to have an end to the old system. Well, the old system is coming to an end. We're in a transitional period. But we have to do our job to make sure that people understand it and don't get whipped into a frenzy about it.
Yes,
exactly.
Harley, wise words to finish up on, I think, for all of us, right? I just want to add just one little point for me to say, which is one of the things that I think was really encouraging, is the diversity of the support for Trump. Latinos voting for Trump, for the Republicans in record numbers, young people, African Americans, they are playing us. They are playing us. We want to have a say in how our lives are run. We want to have a say in how our country is run. So what we got to do is keep demanding of our leaders sovereign rights. And one way to do that, and take advantage of both of you here, right? And the pull that you have is lawful tax revolt. bit.ly/make-war-history. If you're in the UK, it is illegal to pay tax. Probably illegal to pay tax in the US and the European Union as well, because some of that money goes to fund terrorism and goes to fund genocide, and there are domestic statutes in place that prevent that. Harley, Alex, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. I'll have the links in the description below. I'd love to do this again with you both. And I'd say to everybody, wherever you are, fill your pockets with freedom and joy and honor. This is Rich, Harley, and Alex signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.